We've been talking a lot about this appalling attack on Kramatorsk, on a pizza restaurant overnight. Tell us a little bit more about what we've learned about that attack.
Yes, I mean, just to take a step back for a moment with Kramatorsk, I mean, why Kramatorsk? Because it is strategically important. When the Russians took Severodonetsk and Lysychansk last July, the next obvious target was Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, because the Russians then had control of two-thirds of the Donbass. If they get those two places, they get the whole of the Donbass, particularly Kramatorsk, because it's got all of the transport hubs there. And so that has been a target for a while, and it's suffered other missile attacks. But this particular one clearly was a missile attack on a civilian area. And if we look at the result of the attack, it was said to be an S-300, which is a surface-to-air missile normally used against aircraft. They don't have a very big warhead, and this is consistent with a missile that didn't have a particularly big warhead, 70, 80 kilos maybe, something like that. I mean, a 500 kilo warhead would just leave a hole in the ground. So that's consistent with an S-300. But also, S-300s, because they're anti-aircraft, they're very accurate. It's a small warhead designed to hit a moving target, fast-moving target. And so this degree of damage shows you what an S-300 will do, if that's indeed what it was. But also, the accuracy means that it must have been targeted on this building. And yes, that's a war crime. It's a civilian building.
Well, yeah, and at least 10 people dead, including children there.
Indeed.
And this comes off the back of an extraordinary weekend that saw this attempted military rebellion by the Wagner Group. What's the latest on that, and what's happened to the Wagner Group now? Yeah,
very interesting. I mean, the Wagner Group still exists. They've gone back into Ukraine. They're still with formed units. They've still got a lot of equipment. They've got their own air force. They've got their own artillery, their own tanks, their own people. President Putin said he'll give them three alternatives. Either they can all go home as individuals, they can join the Russian army as individuals, or they can go to Belarus as units and train the Belarusian army. Now, I don't think that most of them will take any of those options. For a start, I mean, they are still there as formed units, and I'm not sure this rebellion is entirely over yet, and we don't really know where Prigozhin is and whether he might maybe do something else with them or try to. But secondly, there are any number of other groups like this, like the Patriot Group, like the Stream Group. They could go into other groups in Ukraine, which are a bit like Wagner, or they could go to Africa. Wagner has big interests across Africa where they can earn a great deal of money. They can play barbaric games with nobody apparently taking any real notice. And I think a lot of them, if they have to choose, will either go to another group in Ukraine or go to Africa. I don't think they'll do any of the things that President Putin says he's offering them as alternatives. So there's still a major problem for the Russian military.
Well, yes, and what about Putin and the people around him? What's being said since then about this rebellion?
Yeah, speaking of major problems, I mean, Putin is trying to appear that everything is normal, and they're sort of putting out, making 3 speeches in 20 hours and putting out bits of video to show that the government is normal. But what's interesting is the people that we haven't heard from. Shoigu, the defence minister, he's out and about. We've seen pictures of him behaving normally. But we don't know what's happened to Gerasimov. Gerasimov is the chief of the general staff. He's the man in charge of all of the armed forces, and he's in charge of the operation in Ukraine, in overall charge. We haven't seen him since the military rebellion. This man, Surovikin, we said last night, so keep your eye on him, because he was close to Prigozhin. There were lots of rumours that he was somehow implicated, and overnight, American intelligence put a story out to the New York Times saying that he definitely knew, that the intelligence people knew that he knew about the military rebellion at least a couple of days before it happened. Now, it may be that American intelligence is just trying to clear the pitch and actually give Putin something else to worry about. I don't think Putin needs any encouragement to be paranoid. But, what has happened to Surovikin is very interesting. He's one of the deputy commanders to Gerasimov for the whole operation. He's still head of the Air Force. He hasn't been seen since this military rebellion took place. And even Medvedev, former president, former prime minister, he's now the deputy chief of the National Security Council. Now, Putin had a meeting of all his security chiefs on Monday, and he wasn't there. The deputy chief of the National Security Council wasn't there. And we do know that his personal aircraft, they all have private aircraft, his personal aircraft left Moscow and flew to Oman. Now, we don't know whether he was on it or not, but his aircraft is still in Oman, but he hasn't been seen. So when we think about stability returning to Moscow, we're more interested in the people we haven't heard about than those that we have.